I never teach about Israel just as a state. Israel is really a very unique phenomena. And to understand any phenomena, it's very important to understand the stories, the master stories that lie behind that phenomena. In the case of Israel, there are two very big master stories that sometimes live together and sometimes clash. But without understanding these two master stories, you cannot understand modern day Israel. The first master story is a story that appears for the first time in the Talmud, and then was repeated by and rewritten by Shai Agnon. I don't know how many of you know of the name Shai Agnon, the only Israeli to ever get the Nobel Prize for Literature. As a matter of fact, the only Israeli who lived in Israel to get the Nobel Prize for anything other than peace. We have 3 people who got the Nobel Prize for peace. We have no peace. But we did get the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Agnon is probably one of the most prolific of all of Israel's writers, all of Israel's storytellers. And to my mind, if you want to describe a knowledgeable Jew, I would say a knowledgeable Jew is a Jew who can understand Agnon on all the different levels that he writes at one time. And he tells a story, a beautiful story, which he tells, called The Fable of the Goat. And it's a story that talks about an old man who had a goat. An old man who was ill. He had a son, he was ill, he started to groan, he went to the doctor said he has to drink goat's milk. So he went out and bought himself a goat. But the strangest thing happened. Every few days, the goat used to disappear. And whenever the goat came back, its udders were filled with milk that had the taste of heaven. And the father didn't know where it is that the goat goes, did not know what it is that the goat drinks. So he called his son, and he said to his son, "My son, follow the goat. Tell me, where is it that the goat goes?" And the son said, "You know what I will do? I will tie a leash to the neck of the goat." By the way, the word for leash in Hebrew is meshicha, written with a Hebrew letter chaf. For some reason, Agnon wrote the word meshicha, with a chet, as if it came from the word Mashiach. And that very same night, the goat started to pull on the leash. The son woke up, and the son followed the goat. The goat went out, went into a cave. He knew not how long was he in the cave. Was he there for 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months? But when he came out the other side, he saw these beautiful lush hills in front of him, with beautiful greenery and boxer trees and water trickling down the mountain. And he watched as the goat drank of this water, and he watched as the goat ate of this fruit. And he watched as the goat's udders became filled. And he lay down and basked in the sun. And after a while, he knew not how long he was there. Was he there for 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 months? The goat suddenly got up and started to move back towards the cave. And as he did so, the son saw in the distance 3 men. And he said, "I'm going to talk to those men." He went up to them and he said, "Who are you and where am I?" And the men said to him, "You are in Eretz Israel. You are in the land of Israel. You are in the mountains of the Galilee. And it is now Friday evening. It is almost Shabbat. And as is our custom, we go out into the fields to welcome the Sabbath queen. Come and pray with us." And the son said, "Oh my God, the goat's pulling, and my father's waiting. But it's Shabbat, I can't go. What am I going to do?" And he says, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send my father a message." And he takes a note, and he writes his father a note, and he says to his father, "Dad, you remember you always spoke to me about Eretz Israel, the land of our salvation? Grab the leash and follow the goat. He will bring you to the land of Israel. And he took the note and he put it in the goat's ear, because he knew that whenever his father saw that goat, he used to pat the goat's head. And whenever the goat shook its head, whenever he patted the head, the goat shook its head, and he knew that the note would fall out. So he put the note into the goat's ear. He sent the goat into the cave, and he went off to pray. At the other side, there's a father waiting for his son. And out of the cave, suddenly comes a goat alone. And he felt the way Jacob must have felt when he came home with the brothers, when the brothers came home without Joseph. And he said to himself, where is my son? Has an evil beast devoured him? Where is my son? And he became so filled with anxiety, he forgot to pet the goat's head. And the goat never shook its head. And the note never fell out. And every day when the father saw this goat, he was reminded of his son. And after a while, he couldn't take it any longer. He called the shochet, the ritual slaughterer, had the goat slaughtered. And when they skinned the goat, the note fell out of his ear. And the father picked up the goat, picked up the note, and he said, woe unto me, for not petting the head of that goat, I ruined my chances for salvation. Agnon told that story when he got the Nobel Prize. And he concluded by saying, Mr. King, I want you to know that I am the first generation of Jews who have found their way back to the land of Israel. Now that's a big master story. It's a story that has accompanied the Jewish people for thousands of years, this big dream which says we sinned. We're being punished for our sins. We're hoping that God will forgive us, and if he forgives us, what will he do? He will return us to our land. It is something that has affected Jewish life for 2,000 years. When you pray in the direction of Israel. When you dream of salvation, you dream of Israel. That's the one master story. There's a second master story which is much newer. It's only about 250 years old. They're the Jews living in the ghetto, waiting for God to send this Messiah who will forgive them, as a sign that he forgave them, and will return them to their land. And the Jew sitting in the ghetto is waiting for the big M, the Messiah. And instead of the Messiah comes a little m, called modernity. All of a sudden, Europe changes. Modernity takes over. Modern liberalism, individualism, modern nationalism. And some of the Jews living in the ghetto watch as the ghetto walls fall, and they hear the sounds of modern nationalism. Many of them tried to assimilate and stop being Jewish, and they did not succeed. And they came out with this amazing reaction to the fact that anti-Semitism didn't stop. And they said to the non-Jew, Mr. Non-Jew, I'm trying to become one of you, but you won't let me. So you know what? I'm going to become just like you. You have an anthem, you have a flag, you have a state, you have an army. That's the way I'm going to be Jewish. I'm going to take what I learned from you, the Europeans, about modern nationalism, and I'm going to apply the laws of modern nationalism to the Jewish people. And I am going to create modern Zionism and the state that is now called the State of Israel. Within 50 years, these European Jews create the Zionist movement that creates the modern State of Israel. Now, have you all been to Israel? Where did you visit? Did you visit the site on which the Jew is applying to the Jewish people the laws of modern nationalism? Or did you visit the site, the place in which God is fulfilling his promise to return the Jews to the land of Israel? These are two completely different stories living side by side in Israel. You can't understand Israel if you don't have a look at the way in which these two stories have impacted our lives. How these two stories impact our politics. How these two stories create our understanding of what is the Israel that we're living in and that we're relating to. So I want to have a look at a couple of texts that deal and that will show you some of these questions. I want to first look at this readings from Israel's Declaration of Independence. The date is May the 14th, 1948. David Ben-Gurion, a man with an amazing haircut, gets up on a platform in Tel Aviv and reads out this most important legal document that the state of Israel has. We do not have a constitution. We don't even have a proper Bill of Rights. What we do have is our Declaration of Independence. We, the Council of Jews, the government of the Jews who were living in Israel at that time, hereby declare the creation of a Jewish state to be known as Israel. Based on what? What gave us the right to do that? What does the document say? There are two reasons over here. One they call our natural and historic right, referring to story number one. This is where we came from. This is where we're going back to. This is ours. It's been a promise. That's what's happening. And the second reason is the world recognized our rights as a modern nation state, a product of modern nationalism through the United Nations. You can't have a document creating the state that doesn't have to reflect both stories. What is Jewish immigration? That's for Jews moving from here to there. What's the ingathering of the exile? Jews moving from here to there. Why do you have to say it twice?
I think it's the same.
For precisely the same reason. This first founding document of ours has to call on those two stories as its very, very basis. What we will do in this country will be for the benefit of all its inhabitants. Well, let's see what the Arabs think about it, but go on. It'll be based on freedom, justice, and peace, people. Where does that come from, freedom, justice, and peace? The American, but the French Revolution, primarily. Freedom, justice, isn't it great? But not some freedom, justice, and peace of Europe. Read on, freedom, justice, and peace.
As envisaged by the prophets of Israel.
Freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by story number one. Again, you see that mix of the two stories constantly. It'll guarantee freedom of religion, social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion. Didn't you just say we're a Jewish state? What are you talking about, irrespective of religion? But go on. It will guarantee freedom of religion. Do you know that the country in which there is least freedom of religion for Jews happens to be in the state of Israel? And you know why? Because both of these stories didn't talk about a Jewish religion. Both these stories spoke about the Jewish people. The creation of the state was not a connection to a religion, it was a connection to the Jewish people. Even though it was an act of God, was in one of the stories, it referred to God's promise to this particular people to the time when they spoke about freedom of religion, they were talking about non-Jews. And Israel guarantees freedom of religion to all religions except the Jews. Again, all religions and the United Nations. What are we? Wow. Are we a religion? Are we a nation? That debate still goes on fiercely in Israel. It even affects our laws. The second basic law in the state of Israel that was passed was a law that was called the law of return. The first law that was passed in Israel was a law of the status quo, which said anything that was a law yesterday remains a law until such time as we can change it. In other words, in order to avoid chaos and to create a society in which there's no law, the first law said anything that was a law yesterday remains a law today until we get around to changing it. And the second law that they're talking about over here now is very simple law called the law of return. Can you see it there? Right in the middle of the page. Every Jew is entitled to migrate to Israel. We didn't create the state of Israel for the 650,000 maniacs who happened to be living there at the time. By the creation of this law, we created the law for the entire Jewish people. Therefore, every Jew is entitled to migrate to Israel. It's a great law, right? I know what every means. I know what entitled means. I know what emigrate means. I know what to Israel means. There's just a little word over there that's not so clear.
Who is a Jew? What is a Jew? Who defines a Jew?
That little word Jew is the problem. And the moment that we pass this law, every Jew is entitled to migrate to Israel, questions begin to be arised. What are you talking about when you say Jew? I want to tell you two stories. The first is about a gentleman by the name of Oswald Rufeisen. Oswald Rufeisen was better known as brother Daniel. He was a German Jew who became a Catholic priest. And he moved to Israel. After he'd been in Israel for about 8 years, he realized he wasn't a citizen. And he went to the Ministry of Interior to ask for citizenship. The woman at the Ministry of Interior says to him, okay, you've been here for 8 years, you behaved, they've broken no laws. You're entitled to become a citizen, a naturalized citizen. He says, I don't want that kind of citizenship. I want citizenship under the law of return. They said to him, sorry, sir, but the law of return is for Jews. He says, I'm a Jew. I spent my life in Germany before I came saving Jews. My parents are Jewish, both of them. I demand being given citizenship under the law of return. The woman at the Ministry of Interior says, I'll call my supervisor. And she calls the supervisor, it goes from one supervisor to another supervisor. Eventually it reaches the Supreme Court of the State of Israel. And the Supreme Court of the State of Israel randomly selects 3 judges to judge this case. By chance it happened that one was an Orthodox Jew and 2 secular Jews. They have to decide, is he a Jew under the law of return or not? They couldn't come to a unanimous agreement. And the case was decided by majority opinion. 2 judges against 1. The 2 secular Jews determined he's not Jewish. The moment you've taken upon yourself another religion, you've removed yourself from your people. I cannot imagine any other people in the world making a statement like that. I can understand people saying, the moment you've taken on another people, you've removed yourself from your people. Or people saying, the moment you've taken on another religion, you've removed yourself from your religion. What do these 2 secular Jews, and you were quite right, say? The moment you've removed yourself from your religion, you've separated yourself from your people. And the Orthodox Jew said, you're wrong. His mother's Jewish, he's a Jew. Not a very good Jew, but he's a Jew. And so we got stuck with the problem. He didn't get citizenship then. He got the other kind of citizenship, not under the law of return. There was another case of a gentleman by the name of Captain Shalit. Captain Shalit was an officer in the Israeli army, devoted his life to defending the Jewish people. He was a guy who had wonderful taste, and he fell in love with a Swedish girl who was a volunteer on the kibbutz. He went back to Gothenburg and got married. They had 2 children on the kibbutz where they lived. Everything was fine, but he decided he's got to go and get an Israeli identity card for his children. So he goes to the Ministry of Interior, and on an identity card in those days, what appeared was either Jew under nationalism. It said nation, Le'om, Jew, Arab, or other. He gets back the identity cards and it says, other. He goes back, he says, what do you mean other? What are you talking about? Come to my kibbutz, look at all the kids, you tell me which are mine. What do you mean by other? The only language they speak is Hebrew. The only the songs they know are in Hebrew. The only festivals they celebrate are Jewish festivals. What do you mean other? I insist they're Jews. Goes back to the Supreme Court. This time the Supreme Court decides, Knesset, you have an unclear term on your books. You have to decide what you mean by that word Jew. After it goes back to the Knesset, they pass an amendment which says as follows: you are born to a Jewish mother, or you have converted, and you are not a member of another religion. That solves the problem. I mean, Father Daniel is a member of another religion. This covers that. Shalit's children, their mother's not Jewish. It covers that. But there's only one little word in this amendment that's not too clear. And what is that word? What do you mean by convert? And the moment this amendment is passed, there's a gentleman who lived in 770 Eastern Parkway by the name of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who began a worldwide battle to get the state of Israel to add 3 words to this law. You were born to a Jewish mother or converted according to halakha. Wow. You know how many times this has come to the Knesset to have these words added, and it's never passed. The law remains with this amendment as it is.
But even halakha wouldn't have helped.
But then you ask, what is halakha? But the thing is that the last time it failed by, I think it was 6 votes, in a Knesset which had at the time 8 or 10 Arab members of the Knesset. So how do I know that Israel is a Jewish state? It's the only place in the world where an Arab decided who is a Jew. But that raised very, very important issues. Because there were people who said, wait a second, they can't participate in this kind of a discussion. Well, that raises the question, is Israel a democracy or not? Why should the Arabs not? I mean, they participate in all laws. They're citizens of the country. They're full and complete citizens of the country. What you're saying now is there are certain laws that they should not be allowed to participate in. Well, that brings into question Israel's very democracy. So as you can see, this issue of Israel and the 2 stories are not quite clear. I know we're a Jewish state because it's the only place in the world, as I said, where an Arab decided who is a Jew. It's not only on the level of the laws. I want you to have a look at certain of our thinkers in Israel and how they think about these issues. Uzi Onan was the head of an organization called the bottom of page 2?
To prevent religious compulsion.
Yes, against religious coercion in Israel. Will somebody read what Uzi Onan writes?
I will.
Yeah.
It may be asserted that today it is clearer than ever that Israel is not a Jewish state.
Oh, we're not even a Jewish state. What were they talking about? Israel is not a Jewish state. It didn't depend on the borders and where we're living. on what the land we captured, even before we captured the West Bank. Israel was not a Jewish state. Why? Israel is a state which there is a legislature, and it decides by the legislature on their own views what the law in the country will be. It's not ruled by Jewish law. Not all Jews are citizens of Israel. At that time, not even the majority of Jews were citizens of Israel. Not even the majority of babies born in the Jewish world were born in Israel. Today, we're at least normal by the fact that the majority of Jewish babies born in the Jewish people are born in Israel. That's the beginning of normalcy. But yeah, he's saying no. And the Jews don't pay taxes. They're not a part of the state of Israel. Who says that it belongs to them? You don't even have to be Jewish to become an Israeli. So what do we talk about, people? Well, I mean, you should have gone to Hawaii. Or you really want to be with your people, you should have gone to Florida. Or stayed in New York. What are you talking about, a Jewish state? Today I learned, together with Yehuda Kurtzer, different opinions about by American leaders. And I kept on doing the flashback, look what he's talking about. And we're having the same arguments in Israel about what Israel, what is our commitments, is it a Jewish state or not? Is Israel a Jewish state? That's going to depend on how you behave. No, it's not a legal definition. It's an opinion about whether this is a Jewish state or not. He's saying you will prove it by the way you behave. If you are committed to Tikkun Olam as a state, that will prove that you're a Jewish state, according to Professor Bergstein. And he was the professor who replaced Martin Buber at the head of the philosophy department, and one of the great thinkers in the state of Israel. You know what he's basing this on? He's basing this on a conversation that God Almighty has with a guy who bears my name, Avraham, not me, the first one. And God says to Avraham three things. Number one, Avraham, go and build a family. I know your wife's already 100 years old, but I'll help you. Build the family. Number two, Lech lecha me'artzecha lemoladecha. Leave your land and go to your homeland. And people, after the Shoah, we, the Jewish people, had to do both things. We had to rebuild the family, and we went back to our land. But there was a third thing that he's warning us about. And that's when God said, as part of these three things, to the Jewish people, to Avraham Avinu, the first Jew, v'nivrachu bachem kol mishpachot hadamah. May all the peoples of this earth be blessed by your existence. I am creating you. I'm telling you to build your family. I'm telling you to go back to your home for one reason, so the world will be blessed by your presence. And comes Professor Bergstein and reminds us of, if we behave in a certain way, then we will fulfill our role as a Jewish people. So are we a Jewish state? I have a group of Canadian leaders in Israel. And I'm their guide, I'm working with them. And I get a phone call that Prime Minister Rabin wants to come and meet with them. I called my friend in the Prime Minister's office. I said, why does Rabin want this? He says they've just put the budget into the Knesset and he wants to hide somewhere. He heard that you were reading a group. He's coming to meet with your group. He'll be there in 10 minutes. So I wait for Rabin to come, and Rabin comes, and he talks to the groups, and he says, I'm so happy you're here. This amazing Jewish state. You know why it's a Jewish state? It's a Jewish state because it's the state of the Jewish people. And by the way, that's why we have to give up much of the land of Israel, in which Arabs are living. We can't remain a Jewish state if we have so many Arabs living within the state of Israel. They will become a majority. We will no longer become a Jewish state. I believe in a Jewish state. That is why I'm leading. This was 2 weeks before he was shot. I am leading the battle now to come to a peace agreement in which we will get out of the majority of the lands we captured in 1967. He leaves, and Benny Begin, the head of, he was the son of Menachem Begin, he was scheduled to come and meet with the group. He comes, he says, I welcome you to the state of Israel. I welcome you to this Jewish state. What is a Jewish state for me? A state in which the land of Israel is in the hands of Jews. Yeah. That's what makes it a Jewish state. So you're asking me why we're raising the question? We're raising the question because it's a question. It's an issue. Anybody who lives in Israel and doesn't live in a ghetto in Israel has to deal with it each and every day. Our politics deal with it. I don't like it when other people raise the question, but we can't ignore the question. It's a very serious issue. So I want to read one more. Professor Schweid. Where is he? I'm leaving him for the last, although there are others that I would suggest you read and you study and you look at it and you think seriously about this question. Top of four, Rabbi Schweid. He's my teacher, professor, the head of the Department of Philosophy at the Hebrew University now, or after Bergman. When he says, I'm a Zionist state, I asked him, can I use this? He says, I call it a Zionist state because a Zionist state is for me a Jewish state. It's the guarantee that this is a Jewish state. And so when you use the word Zionist, that's what he's talking about. Zionism's specific purpose was to change the Jews into a nation from a people. The Jews are a people. We will call so an Am. Le'om is a nation. When the Jews met with modernity, they came out of that modernity with two major tendencies. Part of the people became a religion. Before 250 years ago, Judaism was never a religion. The term the Jews are a religion did not exist. We were a people that had a God-centered culture, but we were a people wherever we lived. It was not tied to a place, and it was not tied to... When we came out of the meeting with modernity, some of the people became a nation, and others people became a religion. And that is why Jews, diaspora Jews, and I struggle hard to teach this text to diaspora Jews, because our language is so different. And I want to give you the example. I was president of Hillel, the best job in the Jewish world. There are more frequent flyer miles tied to that job than any other job, because there are Hillels all over the world and you have to visit them. And whenever I go to visit it, when I was the president, whenever I visited Jewish students, I used to carry a chart with me. On that chart I wrote apples, oranges, bananas, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, shirts, jackets, pants, Jews, blank, blank. And I have asked Jewish students throughout the Jewish world to fill in those two blanks. What is to a Jew like an apple is to an orange? I have 208,000 responses from American Jewish students. That's a big number. It's not a sample. Of the 208,000, 206,000 said what? What do you think they said?
Christian and Muslim.
Muslim. Some of that 206,000 said Jew, Catholic, Protestant. But the vast majority said Jew, Christian, Muslim, making the statement that we're a religion. And I want to bet you if I would have done the exercise here, most of you would have automatically said Jew, Christian, Muslim. I tried it this morning with a much bigger group than this, and they all said Jew, Christian, Muslim. I've done 38,000 responses from Israelis, students. Not one. Not one said Jew, Christian, Muslim. Every single one of them, after the word Jew, what do they say? Arab. Who's their distinctive other, their significant other? It's the Arab. And then they go on to write ridiculous things like American, or Italian, or Frenchman, making a statement that we're a nation. And what Herzl set out to do was to turn a people into a nation. What America did, because it was created at the same time approximately as the Jews meeting modernity in Europe, it became a haven for people who wanted to see Judaism as a religion because of the great freedom of religion of this country. Ask your rabbi, he'll tell you that Judaism is a religion. Well, he's wrong. And the Israelis wrong. That's why we have to talk about it. Because, by the way, the Israeli is equally wrong when he says that the Jews are a nation. You're not a member of my nation. When was the last time you paid Israeli taxes? I'll make it even worse. When was the last time you avoided paying Israeli taxes? You're not a member of my nation. You're a member of my people. And we don't teach that we're a people. That's why we're having all of these problems that we're talking about. We teach that either we're a religion or a nation. And that creates the debate. What do you mean by a Jewish state? Israel is the state that is meant to be the homeland, the nation state of the entire Jewish people. The problem for doing that is that we, the Jews, have forgotten that we're a people. Some of us tend to believe it's a religion. Others believe it's a nation. Others are still living in the ghetto, the way they did before this question came up. And others are assimilating and leaving us all together. The real battle to the answer is how can we reestablish a sense of being one people? And I'm going to end with a story about what's a people. You're all New Yorkers, right? Well, in New York there's a bank. A very successful bank, even though it's not a Jewish bank. It's called the Chase Manhattan Bank. And the Chase Manhattan Bank has a slogan that every kid in New York knew. And that slogan was, "You have a friend at Chase Manhattan." It's been their slogan for 72 years. When Bank Discount of Israel opened up their first branch in New York, they looked for a slogan that would attract Jews. And they came out with an amazing slogan. You heard it every hour on local radio and every 4 hours on local TV. The slogan said, "You may have a friend at Chase Manhattan, but we're mishpocha." And you know what a people is? A people is expansion of family. Families expand into a tribe. Tribe expands into a people. The Jews are a people. Our right to the state of Israel is not because we're Israelis. Our very right to create a state. The United Nations didn't recognize us as the Israeli state. It recognizes as the homeland of the Jewish people. When you read this thinking of ourselves as a people, you will understand why it's so important that Israel continue to raise this issue, and that for both the Israeli and the diaspora Jew to start talking about, we're a mishpocha, we're a family.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. and we thank you for your kind support.